The envelope had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 3 days before my father noticed it. I watched him pick it up, turn it over, and set it back down without a word. He didn't ask whose it was. He didn't ask what it contained. That told me everything I needed to know about where things stood between us. Before I get into it, tell me in the comments, what's the most painful thing a parent ever chose over you? I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Mississauga, the kind of neighborhood where everyone's driveway had a minivan, and someone's dad was always doing something to the lawn on a Saturday morning. My father was the kind of man who could fix anything with his hands and break everything with his words. He was good at both. My mother passed when I was 11. Ovarian cancer, fast and merciless. And after that, it was just the two of us in that house. Me and my father and the silence that moved in after her and never left. He remarried when I was 16. Her name was Rochelle. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, a son, 12, and a daughter, 9. Overnight, I became the oldest child in a family that didn't feel like mine. My father didn't sit me down and explain anything. One day he told me he'd been seeing someone. 3 months later, there was a woman's perfume in the bathroom and children's shoes by the front door that weren't mine. I want to be fair. Rochelle wasn't cruel to me. She wasn't warm either. She was the kind of person who was always pleasant in a way that meant nothing. She'd ask how school was going, and then look at her phone while I answered. She made dinners that her kids loved, and that I ate because I was hungry. I don't think she disliked me. I think I just wasn't part of the picture she had in her head when she imagined this life. My father, though. My father was a different story. It started small, the way these things always do. He'd take Rochelle's son, Bryce, to hockey practice on Saturday mornings. He'd taken me to figure skating when I was small. I remembered that, the cold rink, his hand holding mine when I wobbled. But that stopped after my mother died. With Bryce, he was at every game. He bought the equipment. He drove 2 hours on a Thursday night in a February snowstorm to watch a house league playoff game. I sat in my room and heard him come home after midnight, laughing and happy in a way I hadn't heard in years. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was almost an adult. I told myself a lot of things in those years to get through them. I moved out at 18. I got into Ryerson. It's called Toronto Metropolitan now, but it was Ryerson when I went. And I got a student loan and a room in a house share near Garrard Street with 3 other girls I'd never met. My father helped me move exactly 1 box. He had to take Rochelle's daughter to a birthday party that afternoon. I'm not going to tell you I cut contact, I didn't. I came home for Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter. I sat at that table and passed the gravy and smiled when I was supposed to smile. I called my father on his birthday every year without fail. I sent Father's Day cards. I did everything a good daughter was supposed to do. Not because I expected anything back, but because my mother raised me before she died and I was trying to honor that. After I graduated, I got a job as a coordinator at a nonprofit in Toronto. It didn't pay much, but I loved it. I found my own apartment, a 1-bedroom near Bloor West Village, small but mine, with a window that looked out onto a maple tree that turned red every October like it was trying to say something hopeful. I built a life, I made friends, I dated. I stopped waiting for my father to notice that I'd grown into someone worth knowing. Then my grandfather died. My father's father, a man I called Papa, who had a woodworking shop in his garage and always smelled like sawdust and coffee, passed away in the spring 2 years ago now. He was 83 and he'd been declining for a while, so it wasn't a shock. But grief doesn't care about whether you were prepared. I flew home for the funeral, which was held at a church in Hamilton where Papa had been a member for 40 years. At the reception afterward, my father pulled me aside. I thought he wanted to talk about Papa. Instead, he talked about the house. Papa had owned his home outright, a detached 2-story in Dundas, the kind of place that would have sold for close to $900,000 in that market. He had no mortgage. He had savings. He had a small investment portfolio that my aunt, my father's sister, had helped him manage. He had, it turned out, left everything to my father and my aunt in equal shares. We're going to sell the Dundas house, my father told me, standing by the coat rack while people ate sandwiches 20 feet away. Split the proceeds with your aunt. After that, Rochelle and I are going to buy something bigger. Something the kids can use when they're older. The kids. Bryce was 22 by then. Rochelle's daughter Kylie was 19. I nodded. I said that sounded reasonable. I said I was glad Papa had things in order. I didn't say anything about myself because there was nothing to say. Papa's estate wasn't mine. I wasn't named in any will. I had no claim, and I knew that. I wasn't expecting anything. What happened next, though, I wasn't expecting either. 2 months after the funeral, my father called me on a Sunday evening. This was unusual. He typically texted if he needed something. I answered and we made small talk for about 30 seconds and then he said, I need to talk to you about something. Okay, I said. Rochelle and I are looking at a place in Oakville. A bigger house, close to where Bryce is working. It's a bit more than we planned to spend, but with Papa's money and the equity from the current house, we can manage it if we're careful. That sounds nice, I said. I was half watching something on TV and I turned it off, because something in his voice told me I should be paying attention. The thing is, he said, and then he paused and I heard him exhale slowly. The thing is, your grandfather's will. There's a clause. Some of the assets, the non-real estate ones, are held in a family trust. And for them to transfer cleanly to me, I need to show the estate lawyer that all direct descendants are accounted for. I didn't fully understand what he was saying. You're my direct descendant, he said. You and your mother, well, obviously not your mother anymore, but you. The lawyer needs a signed document from you confirming that you have no claim to Papa's estate and that you're releasing any potential interest. I sat there on my couch in my little apartment and I felt something go very still inside me. Just to be clear, I said carefully, you want me to sign something saying I'm giving up any interest I might have in Papa's estate? It's just a formality, he said. You weren't named in the will. You're not entitled to anything. The lawyer just needs it for the paperwork to close. I said I'd think about it. He said the lawyer needed it within 3 weeks. I said I heard him. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. The maple tree outside my window was budding, little points of green just starting to appear. I thought about Papa's garage, the smell of sawdust, the way he used to let me sand the rough edges of whatever he was building. I thought about how at Papa's 95th birthday party, no, his 8th, I'm mixing years, he'd given me a small carved box he'd made himself, with my initials in the lid. I still had it on my dresser. I thought about a lot of things that week. I also called a lawyer. I want to be clear. I went in expecting to be told that my father was right, that I had no standing, that the document was routine. The lawyer, a woman I found through a legal referral service, someone with a calm voice and reading glasses on a chain, took the details and went quiet for a moment. Tell me about the trust, she said. I told her everything I knew. She asked me some questions I couldn't answer and told me she'd look into the trust documentation if I could get a copy. My father, when I asked for a copy of the relevant trust clauses for my own review, seemed surprised. Then he seemed irritated. Then he said he'd ask the estate lawyer. It took 10 days to get anything from him. What I received was incomplete. 2 pages of a document that was clearly much longer. I forwarded it to my lawyer. This is interesting, she told me on the phone the following week. This trust was established in 1987. Your grandfather named his children as primary beneficiaries, but there are provisions for grandchildren in the event of certain conditions. One of those conditions relates to how assets are distributed if a beneficiary has minor dependents at the time of the grantor's death. I was 31 when Papa died. I didn't have children. I asked what that meant for me. It may mean nothing, she said. Or it may mean you have an interest that wasn't disclosed to you. I can't tell you for certain without seeing the full document. I asked my father for the complete trust document. He said he'd have to ask the estate lawyer. 2 weeks passed. I followed up. He told me the lawyer had said the document wasn't relevant to my situation. I said I'd like to make that determination myself. He stopped responding to my texts. Then he called on a Tuesday night, and his voice was different, flat and cold in a way I recognized from childhood, the voice he used when he'd already decided something and was just informing you of it. I need that signature, he said. The lawyer has set a deadline. We're going to lose the deal on the Oakville house if this drags out. I've asked you for the full trust document, I said. I haven't received it. I told you it's not relevant to you. Then it shouldn't be a problem to share it. Why are you making this difficult? His voice was getting louder. I'm your father. This is Papa's estate. This is family money. What's your issue? My issue, I said slowly, is that I've been asked to sign away a legal interest without being allowed to review the relevant documents. You don't have a legal interest. Then showing me the document will confirm that. He was quiet for a moment. And then he said something I will remember for the rest of my life. He said, you know what? This is typical. Your mother was the same way. Always suspicious, always making things harder than they needed to be. I don't know how to describe what that did to me. My mother has been dead for 20 years. She was 11 years gone before she could have any opinion about anything my father did with his life. To use her name like that, to pull her into this moment as ammunition, I felt something close inside me. Not dramatically, not with a surge of anger. It just closed, like a door swinging shut on its hinges, quiet and final. I'll be in touch, I said. If you don't sign this by Friday, he said, you can forget about being welcome here. I'm serious. I've had enough of this. I hung up. I called my lawyer the next morning. She had, while we'd been waiting for documents that weren't coming, been doing her own research. What she found was this. Papa's 1987 trust had been updated in 2009. In the 2009 amendment, there was a clause she described to me carefully, twice, so I'd understand. The clause stipulated that in the event of a beneficiary's death before the grantor, that beneficiary's share would pass to their lineal descendants, children, grandchildren. My father hadn't died before Papa, but my mother had. My mother was not a beneficiary. She was my father's spouse. But I was my father's daughter, and as a direct lineal descendant of the primary beneficiary, I had a potential interest in the trust, not under the clause about deceased beneficiaries, but under a separate provision about distributions to the next generation that my lawyer was still parsing. I want to be honest with you, she said. This isn't a slam dunk. It's complicated and it could be contested. But you have enough of an interest that signing that release without fully understanding it would not be in your best interest. I asked her what I should do. Don't sign anything until you've seen the full document, she said. And if your father is refusing to share it, that's information. I called my aunt, my father's sister, Papa's other child, the one who'd been helping manage his finances. She and I had never been close, but we'd always been cordial. She picked up on the second ring, and I told her I had some questions about Papa's estate. And she went quiet in a way that told me she already knew there was a problem. He didn't tell you about the grandchildren provision, she said. It wasn't a question, no. She was quiet for another moment. And then she said, I told him he needed to talk to you. I told him months ago. She told me what she knew. It wasn't everything. She wasn't the estate lawyer, but it was enough. There was a provision in the 2009 amendment that allowed the trustee, which was a trust company, to make discretionary distributions to grandchildren under certain conditions. Papa had apparently indicated, informally, that he intended for his grandchildren to receive something. He hadn't updated the formal documents to make that happen automatically, but the trustee had discretion to act on documented evidence of his intent. There were letters. Papa had written letters to the trust company in his last few years expressing his wishes about his grandchildren. My aunt had copies. One of those letters mentioned me by name. I went to see my aunt on a Saturday. She made tea and we sat in her kitchen and she handed me a photocopy of a letter written in Papa's handwriting, slightly shaky by the end, but still recognizable, in which he wrote about his granddaughter, how proud he was of the life she'd built, how he hoped she'd always have something solid under her feet. I cried sitting at my aunt's kitchen table, not because of the legal implications, because he'd thought about me, he'd written it down. My aunt and I spent that afternoon talking, really talking, for the first time, about the years after my mother died and what my father had been like, what she'd watched happen in that house and hadn't known how to address. She told me things I'd suspected and things I hadn't known. She told me she was sorry she hadn't done more. I told her there was something she could do now. The estate wasn't closed. The Oakville house deal hadn't gone through yet. My father hadn't gotten the signature he needed, and the trust company couldn't release the investment assets without clearing the outstanding questions about distribution to grandchildren. My aunt, as the other primary beneficiary, had standing to request that the trustee review Papa's letters of intent. She did. I won't go into the full legal detail because it's complicated and some of it is still technically pending. But here's what happened in plain terms. The trust company reviewed Papa's letters, consulted with the estate lawyer, and determined that there was sufficient evidence of intent to warrant a discretionary distribution to me. It wasn't the full value of my potential interest. Nobody was suggesting I was owed half the estate. What it was real. A number with enough zeros to change the feel of things. My father found out on a Wednesday. I know this because my aunt called me that evening and said, he knows. He called me that same night. I let it go to voicemail. He called again on Thursday morning and Thursday evening. On Friday afternoon, he showed up at my building. I know this because my neighbor texted me to say there was a man in the lobby asking for me, and I'd described my father to her once, and she recognized him. I didn't go down. His voicemail messages went from confused to angry to something that sounded almost like pleading, which was a tone I'd never heard from him before, and which I found, honestly, harder to listen to than the anger. Anger from him was familiar. This was new, and it made me sad in a way I wasn't prepared for. He left a message that said, I don't understand why you're doing this. I'm your father. Whatever problems we've had, you're my daughter. We're family. Please call me back. I played it twice. Then I called my lawyer and told her to proceed. I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling this story because I want to be seen as someone who won. I don't feel like I won. I feel like I participated in something that should never have needed to happen. A legal process to establish that my grandfather loved me, which I already knew, in a context where my own father had tried to erase that. I also want to be clear that the money, while not insignificant, was never really the point. My lawyer asked me early on what I was hoping to achieve, and I thought about it for a long time before I answered. What I said was, I want to know what the documents say. I want to make my own decision based on complete information. I want to not be handled. That's all I ever wanted from my father too. Not the estate, not Papa's money. Just to be treated like someone whose presence mattered, whose interests were worth considering, who existed in his life as more than a signature to be collected, and a history to be managed. He never got that. I don't know if he ever will. My aunt and I have dinner together once a month now. She knew my mother well. They were friends before my parents married. And she tells me things about her sometimes, small things, what she was like at 25, what she used to laugh at, the way she drank her coffee. It's something. The distribution from the estate came through in the early spring. I used part of it for something my mother would have understood immediately. I bought a piece of land. A small lot outside of Orangeville, nothing fancy, just a piece of Ontario ground with some old maple trees on it, and a creek along one edge that freezes over beautifully in January. I have no immediate plans for it. I just wanted something I could put my name on, something that would exist in the world as evidence that I was here. Papa would have liked that, I think. He always said the best things you could own were the ones that didn't need electricity. I haven't spoken to my father since the estate was settled. He sent a text, eventually, that said only. I read it, and I put my phone down and I looked out the window at the maple tree, the one that turns red every October. It was summer when the text came, so the tree was just green. Full and ordinary and quiet. I didn't write back. Not because I was punishing him, not because I'd stopped caring. I didn't write back because I had finally, after 31 years, stopped trying to explain myself to someone who had never really been listening. I never wanted Papa's money. I wanted a father who would have made sure I knew about it in the first place.